You know, Alice and I are always looking to be more healthy, and we were just talking about how fasting is one of the best ways to do that, but it's so hard. But the great thing about Prolon is that's not what you're doing. It's not that you're not eating for 5 days. Instead, you're using their science-backed program to convince your body you're fasting.
You guys, this 5-day program really is amazing. It comes beautifully packaged and it does all the thinking for you. Each day is its own box. And by following their program, I know I just feel so much better. And I can't wait to experience Prolon Next Gen and continue to see results. For a limited time, you can be first in line to experience the new Next Gen at special savings. Prolon is offering the Prosecutors listeners 15% off site-wide plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe to their 5-day program. Just visit prolonlife.com/prosecutors. That's PROLONLIFE.com/prosecutors to claim your 15% discount and your bonus gift. prolonlife.com/prosecutors.
This episode of The Prosecutors is brought to you by Huggies Little Movers. Get your baby's butt in a Huggies best-fitting diaper. Huggies Little Movers. We got you, baby.
I'm Jamie Beebe.
And I'm Jake Deptula. We're the host of the Strictly Stalking podcast.
Strictly Stalking is a true crime podcast that explores stalking stories told by the survivors in their own words.
Join us every Tuesday as we interview survivors, advocates, and experts to give you a deep dive into the workings of a stalking case.
Would you know where to turn if you or someone you know is being stalked? We'll also give you the resources to fight back, know your rights, and get justice.
Find Strictly Stalking wherever you listen to podcasts from Podcast One.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are The Prosecutors. Today on The Prosecutors, we finish our look at the Jack Family Disappearance. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and I'm joined, as always, by my saucy co-host, Alice.
Hey, Brett. We're going to interpret saucy as we're getting to the holiday season.
Saucy.
And lots of cooking up different sauces. Are there any sauces that you like? I like cranberry sauce, like homemade
sauce.
with like orange peel in it.
I like it straight out of the can.
I make cranberry sauce, not even to eat, just to have the smell through your home. It's great.
That sounds delicious. Still like it out of the can, though. Can is like, when you still see the rings around it, that's beautiful.
Have you ever had not canned cranberry sauce? Because I'm not saying canned cranberry sauce isn't good. They're just two separate things. You know, like one is...
Oh, they're completely different.
They're not the same category. So it's not like store-bought versus homemade. They're just like different categories.
No, you're right.
So
they're not even the same food.
No. You can have canned and homemade, and they're just two different dishes.
Yeah, that's true. You could. You totally could do that. It would be fine. It's like the difference between watermelon flavoring and watermelon.
Exactly. You could have both, and there's no duplicativity.
I don't even know if there are cranberries in canned cranberry sauce. It's possible. It's just completely...
Canned cranberry sauce tastes like Jell-O to me.
Good Jell-O. But yeah.
Yeah, no, good Jell-O, but it's like, it's Jell-O. Whereas like cranberry sauce, like the lumps of cranberries, you know?
See, as Elizabeth says, I've heard that called cranberry relish when it's like made fresh and it still has the cranberries in it. So I don't know. I don't know if those things are two different things or what, but...
They're not, but... I mean, like, cranberry in a can is supposed to be what you can make fresh. Because if you leave fresh made cranberry sauce long enough, it does gelatinize.
Well, either way, canned cranberry sauce is great. I mean...
Anyways, really glad you guys are back for this very important episode.
And, you know, canned cranberry sauce, it just takes you a second. You just take the top off and then you're done. The hardest part is getting it out of the can. Anyways, So Because
I think
Alice
you could
doesn't
say
want
that
to talk
about
about cranberry
any
sauce
type
anymore.
of cooking. Why would you make fried chicken if you can just go to Popeyes?
I mean, it's not a bad argument. Popeye's pretty good. We've gone off the rails. I don't know.
We
It's
really
okay.
have.
This is
But this is what happens when we move the time that we record by 30 minutes. It's like you're totally thrown off,
exactly. It's weird because we moved it up earlier, so you'd think we'd be less loopy because we'd be more sort of energetic.
But apparently we needed that 30 minutes to chill out.
I've been sick for like a month, so I feel like
I'm
my mind's
sorry.
not working right anyways. So if you don't like these
stinks.
episodes, I'm just not on my game.
Blame it on the illness.
Can't all be like Alice and always on top of things. But
Oh, I'm sick all the time too.
All
It's
the
okay. It's
time.
having kids.
well, guys, we're back. This is our happy part of the show because this is another one of those super depressing cases that we often cover, as you guys noticed from the first episode. I mean, this is a case that involves the disappearance of an entire family, and in a lot of ways, just the continuation of generational trauma that this family had endured, culminating in this disappearance where an entire family is able to vanish off the face of the earth and no one in authority seems to have any concern about it. And in fact, they don't even have concern, but when some random person, I guess, says that, oh no, they came home, the police, the newspapers, everybody just assumes that's true and loses months of possible investigative time. And that's essentially where we left you, with very little known about this case. There's a sketch that's very general. Probably, we talked about this in Delphi, how people used to say that the problem with Bridge Guy is Bridge Guy looked like every late 20s to middle-aged man in Indiana. And I think you have a similar thing. You have a sketch of someone who could be anyone working in the logging industry, which I think most people think this is somebody who has some experience in that. And that's really all you have to go on. That is until January 28th, 1996, when we get our first potential tip in this case. Now, those of you who remember from the last episode, we started this in 1990. So 6 years passes, and really, we get nothing. We know nothing about this case. The police know nothing. They have no leads. They have nothing to go on. And then in 1996, a tip does come in. And it's a weird one. So an anonymous male tipster calls the Vanderhoof RMCP from a house party in Stony Creek, a small town about 10 miles away from Vanderhoof. According to people who've heard this call, and I looked for it, I tried to find it because I was hoping it had been released. And I had even read somewhere that it had been released, but I couldn't find it anywhere. That documentary we talked about last week, Real Horror did the documentary The Family That Vanished. They play like a clip that could be this call, or it could be a reenactment of the call. It's not really clear what it is, and I couldn't tell. But nevertheless, people who've heard the call say that what the person said was, the Jack family was buried at the south end of, and then the most important word of all is muffled ranch. And then they hang up. And the police were never able to locate the caller. They figured out where this call came from. They figured out that it was a house party, but unfortunately there were a whole lot of people at that house party. And obviously, nobody there was claiming they made the call. And number two, nobody knew who all was there. So it's a very interesting thing that this person in the middle of a house party called in this tip.
Right. They were at a party. Usually if you're at a party, first of all, there's probably other people around who might overhear you. Why would you think of this after 6 years or so in the middle of a party while you're having a few drinks with friends, decide to call in this tip? All of this is incredibly strange and suspect.
There are a couple possibilities here. One is that someone at the party shared this information with someone else, and that person decided to call it in. That's one possibility. Everybody was drinking. People talk. We talk about this all the time. This is why it's hard to keep anything a secret, even if you're the only one who knows it. People tend to want to talk. So that's a possibility. It's possible that something like that happened. The other possibility is this is something somebody had known for some period of time, and it kind of weighed on them, and they've realized a great way to deliver this message is to make a phone call in the middle of a party, because how are they ever going to find me? It's kind of clever if you think about it.
And one thing I have to know, I know some people may be thinking, well, maybe it's just a drunken prank. Like they're all drinking and it's kind of like, hey, remember that family? What if we called in a tip? I hear that they have nothing. maybe that's a theory, except for the fact that there's been no media coverage of this case. This is not like the JonBenet Ramsey case where it's on every single tabloid. Every time you go to the grocery store, you're like, JonBenet, JonBenet, JonBenet. And people talk about it all the time. Very few people even know that the Jack family's missing. And some people, most people, I would say, thought they were found because of the misreporting. And so this is an obscure disappearance. You know, it is not on the top of people's minds. It's not on the tip of the tongue. This is not something that people in town talk about all the time. So I don't necessarily think this falls into the category of a drunken prank. Now, they may have all been drinking, and when you're drinking, your threshold for keeping secrets falls down. But this lends me to believe that this is not just some prank, but it's based in some amount of truth, whether from the person who's reporting it or they heard it from someone.
And that's such a great point. We talked about this in other cases like Delphi. We've talked about the curse and the blessing of media attention. The blessing is you get a lot of eyes on it and you can get a lot of information out there and maybe somebody knows something. But there is definitely a downside to that. Well-meaning people will call in tips. You know, when somebody goes missing and the story goes viral, everybody in America sees that person somewhere. You know, you'll get tips. When we talked about Mitrice Richardson, you know, that case wasn't even that viral and they were getting tips in Las Vegas. We talk about Maura Murray. You have people seeing her in little towns in Canada. You know, the more attention a case gets, the more people are going to talk about it. And then you have the pernicious people. Brian Schaefer, somebody brought this up in the chat as well. When Brian Schaefer's dad died, somebody posted on his obituary a comment pretending to be Brian, and they figured out who that person was. Why you would do something like that, I have no idea. That is just a terrible thing to do. I don't know why you would do something like that, but people do it. The Jack family got basically no coverage, basically none, and hadn't gotten any for 6 years. This is 6 years later. So I think Alice is right. The chances that this is just, I mean, it's possible that, as happens sometimes when you're in a gathering, you start talking about stuff, and maybe somebody did say, hey, do you remember that? Wasn't that crazy? And that's a possibility. And maybe that's even the most likely thing, but it doesn't seem as likely as if this were JonBenet, or if it were any case that got any modicum of attention. This case has gotten very little. So the police certainly took it seriously. They sent the audio out to be analyzed. And they believed that after enhancing the audio and studying it, that the person said Gordy's Ranch. And there was a Gordy's Ranch in the area where the family had disappeared. So they searched Gordy's Ranch, including with, you know, ground penetrating radar. They dug up a bunch of stuff. They gave it a good shot, but they didn't find anything. Now, the problem is, south end of a ranch, even if you're trying really hard to find something, we've talked about how hard it is to find a body just laying out in a field. If the body really was buried and it had been 6 years, there won't be as much evidence of disturbed ground, all the sort of things you might look for when you're looking for a fresh grave type situation. That probably is all gone by then. So it's possible they are buried there and they just didn't find anything. It's also possible, of course, that they got the wrong place, that they enhanced the audio and that's what they heard, but that's not actually what was said. And unfortunately, unless this person comes forward, and, you know, maybe they're listening to this podcast right now, unless this person comes forward and clarifies what they said almost 28 years ago, then I don't know that we'll ever know exactly what they were trying to relate to the police. And unfortunately, that's pretty much all we had for a very long time.
Yeah. And with this tip, I mean, it really does just come out of nowhere. And you have to wonder, like, what the motivation was for the person who reported it. Because if they wanted the family to be found, they'd be watching the news, see that the family was never found. So you would think maybe they'd try harder, maybe another tip, maybe write in a letter if they don't want to be traced, something like that. But nothing happens, right? It's not like, it's not Gordy's. I meant, you know, Morton's or something like that. No one came forward to clarify. And despite South End, like you said, is just such a general area. And it probably is. When you're looking at a ranch, it's hard to say, like, it's by the fifth fence posts. You're not going to have landmarks like that. And so I've been, you know, turning over in my mind what this person who called this tip in was thinking. What did they want? Did they really want the family found? Did they know something? Did they not know something? I've analyzed it left and right, and I still can't come up with anything other than I don't think it was a prank. Now, like Brett said, they tried. They took this tip as far as they could and they found nothing. And again, the case was cold, absolutely cold. There was nothing that happened until August 28th, 2019. So 13 years later, the RCMP executed a search warrant on a property south of Vanderhoof, and they searched the property for 2 days, utilizing civilian consultants, heavy machinery, and ground penetrating radar. Unfortunately, nothing was discovered. So all we know on the outside is this search happened. What led them to it? It's not clear. Clearly, they thought something big was happening because a 2-day search is a pretty large search, and all the kind of machinery they bring in, the consultants, it's more than you typically have in a search warrant. Typically, the search warrant is going to be internal to whatever investigative body it is. It's just going to be the agents, just the law enforcement officers searching. But here you have kind of outsiders being brought in to help, heavy machinery brought in to presumably dig. And over the years, investigators have since conducted hundreds of interviews, obtained thousands of documents related to the case, and have searched several properties, all in search of the Jack family. But even still, this case did not receive nearly the investigative efforts or media coverage it should have, considering an entire family with 2 young children vanished in the middle of the night.
And look, I think it's pretty obvious at this point. This is another example of, in Canada, these First Nations people who just really, there wasn't a lot of focus on them. We have similar problems in the United States. I'm not casting stones at Canada because we live in a glass house on this, but it just is a fact that this was a huge problem in Canada for a really long time. And it's not just the police, it's not just the government, it's the media as well. And you had an entire family disappear. And this case was not reported on a single national news outlet in the year following the disappearance. You had an entire family vanish into thin air with basically no leads, though a sketch of the person who may have taken them, which would have been a nice thing to put out on the television, and it was not considered worthy of national news. And this is not just, that was a different time. They didn't have the bandwidth. They couldn't cover that. Medium.com looked into this, and we're going to link to that story, and it's worth reading. And they report there were other well-documented disparities in media coverage between indigenous groups and non-indigenous groups at the time. And there were plenty of murders, plenty of disappearances. They were making the front page news in the year following the Jack family's disappearance, but none of them were for indigenous people, even though, as we've talked about before, First Nations people go missing or murdered at much higher rates than the general public. And of course, it's not just the media, it's also the RCMP. And there's been heavy criticism of how they handled this, particularly at the time. When the family was first reported missing, they didn't take it seriously. They did not accept that this could be foul play. They did not treat it as if it was foul play. They made no major searches for the family. They closed the case accidentally 2 weeks after it was opened, and didn't open it again for several months when the family reached out and said, "Hey, how's the investigation going?" And they said, "What investigation?" And it looks like, and it seems like at this point, they're putting a lot more effort into it. But those hundreds of interviews that they did back, in 2019, would have been nice if they'd have done those in 1990. Probably would have got a lot more information in 1990. There's so much stuff that there's no way someone is going to remember 30 years later. Things like seeing the truck or something unusual happening. There's all sorts of stuff you might recall in the moment a week later, 2 weeks later, that there's no way you're going to remember 30 years later. I was alive in 1990. I don't really remember much about it. I'm sure most of you who were around in 1990 probably don't remember much about it. I don't remember much about 1999 or like what happened last week, frankly. And losing that much time is just it's a crushing blow for this investigation.
And I think it's worth repeating, we said it last week, but it's worth repeating kind of how ridiculous, now that you guys know even more about this case, that the RCMP refused to treat it as foul play. We're talking an entire family. At the very least, if it's not outside of the family foul play, some foul play happened within the family. Some harm came to those kids at the hands of someone. Because when you have a family who has family ties, they're not recluses, they're not holed away. They quite literally are talking to their family members every hour of the night. Disappear? This does not comport with who the RCMP said maybe he just found a new job and forgot to phone home. He didn't forget to phone home at 11 o'clock p.m., midnight, 1 a.m. I mean, he was calling his family literally all hours of the night. Would it be part of his, personality characteristic to forget to call for 3 weeks? Unlikely, based on the pattern that we know about him. And that's what's so infuriating, that they wouldn't treat this with the, seriousness it needed at the beginning. And so that's the entire timeline. There is not a lot to go by at all. But I know probably you guys have already been churning theories in your mind. And, this is one of those that really, it's almost like there's no bad theories, because there are so many questions here, and it's worth kind of going down each of these theories and seeing what's more likely than not. There's just a complete lack of evidence, considering 4 people are gone. And it's so surprising to me that more tips haven't come in through the years. And that's because at least somebody talked, even if only one person knows. Let's say the tipster back in 1996 was the perpetrator. We know at least one person has talked. More likely, that person, if they talked to other people. There's likely more people who know something, and it's just mind-boggling that no one has said anything. And they may not have said anything because of the lack of media attention and the kind of misreporting on this case. So let's try to figure out what happened to the Jack family that late August night in 1989.
Let me say one thing before we get started, because this is one of those cases where it's going to seem like speculation, what we're going to do when we talk about theories. And it's not really. Obviously, we don't know what happened, but what we're going to try and do is take the evidence that we do have and eliminate some possibilities and narrow some things down. I think it's really important to point that out, because I see this sometimes in discussions about true crime. Some people have this idea that unless it's just spelled out for you exactly what happened, well, you're just speculating. Well, I mean, that's life. Life, when you're trying to uncover mysteries or figure things out, is taking the evidence you have, comparing it to the real world and to your experiences, and trying to make sense out of it. That's what juries do. Juries, they often don't have a video of the crime being committed. They have to take the evidence they have, consider the possibilities, and reach a conclusion. And that's what we always try and do when we talk about these theories.
Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely, and parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Try Greenlight risk-free today at greenlight.com/Wondery.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Bombas makes the most comfortable socks, underwear, and T-shirts.
Warning, Bombas are so absurdly comfortable you may throw out all your other clothes.
Sorry, do we legally have to say that?
No, this is just how I talk, and I really love my Bombas.
They do feel that good. And they do good, too. One item purchased equals one item donated.
To feel good and do good, go to bombas.com/Wondery and use code Wondery for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/Wondery and use code Wondery at checkout.
That's a great point, Brett. It's a lot kind of like the analogy to circumstantial versus direct evidence. We've told you that circumstantial and direct evidence have equal weight in court. And in fact, in reality, circumstantial evidence is what is needed in most cases because they bolster from different angles. You know, you can imagine like, I don't know, I set up a bunch of lawn ornaments today, like Christmas lawn ornaments. So think of you put like a reindeer, you know, a Christmas lawn ornament in the ground. Let's say that reindeer is direct evidence. Okay, maybe. Is it going to stand up to the blizzards and the winds and torrential downpour for the next month? Maybe, maybe not. But if you have a bunch of stakes from different angles at the bottom holding up all 4 legs of it, that's your circumstantial evidence. You can see how it can be just as weighty, if not more so, in bolstering what maybe an eyewitness said. I saw a reindeer. but maybe they can't tell you exactly where it was staked in. You know, how many feet over from that tree, in front of which house, which street light, shined on it, at what time of day, casting what shadows. There's a lot of questions when it's just direct evidence. Same here. We have evidence. The juries and us never know exactly minute by minute what happened. That's why we're talking about it right now. If there were a security camera trained on the Jack family this entire time, there would be no mystery. We'd know exactly what happened. But that's not what happened. And that's also not what happens when you have a case go to the jury. The jury is making logical jumps based on evidence. You have kind of these touch points of evidence and you're jumping from one to the next. That jump is, some people call it speculation, but they're logical jumps based on what you know. And you can see how those jumps can get narrower and narrower as the guardrails of other evidence kind of guide you in certain ways. Do you know exactly what filled that gap? No, but the guardrails of evidence can point you to the right direction. And I think it's worth having this conversation because we hear all the time, not just in our podcast, but in every podcast and across law enforcement and across criminal cases. That's just speculation. They're trying to say it from their own experience. That's exactly what logical reasoning is. That's what analysis is. So if you're doing that and someone, kind of points to you and says, you're just speculating, there's wild speculation rooted in absolutely nothing, which should probably not be taken very seriously. And then there's the kind of logical analysis and reasoning that we try to implement here. So even though we don't know exactly what happened to the Jack family, I think we know enough to be able to have those guardrails up to guide us towards more likely theories than more unlikely theories. Okay, one major kind of red flag in this entire story is that unknown man from the bar, that Paul Bunyan character. And it's just most likely that this man had something to do with the disappearance of the family. He probably had some ill intentions for the Jack family, but what exactly, those intentions were or who he was still is not clear. We haven't heard of any other reports of a man looking like him trying to coax other men and their families away. There aren't other sightings of him, throughout this town or even in this area. No one has come forward and said, oh yeah, that's a cousin's cousin, or that guy, drank at the bar every Tuesday, or, oh, he's been passing through and he's along this, highway corridor. We haven't heard anything about this guy except that people saw him that night with the Jacks. So the first theory is that this amazing offer for this job just never happened. This is an extreme but possible theory that the job offer just never happened, and Ronnie, who was overwhelmed and unable to catch up financially, used the perfect job offer as an opportunity to just take his family and disappear. Either to run away from maybe the financial constraints that he was facing, maybe debts that he had, or just the inability to dig out of the financial hole he was in and start a new life. But I don't think he had any means to start a new life. Or more darkly, he took this opportunity to pretend he had an offer so he could take his family and commit something like a murder-suicide. There are, of course, many problems with this theory. First, this man isn't made up. People did see Ronnie with this man at the bar and at his house. And there are, of course, the innocent bystanders that it's very possible, of course, that this man, this Paul Bunyan guy, was just an innocent bystander. And Ronnie used him as a convenient patsy or a ride out to some remote place where Ronnie could do whatever he wanted. But the man did exist. He just wasn't this terrible character who was luring away the Jack family. But second, like I mentioned, the family just didn't have the resources to start over. Maybe he could run from his financial problems, but he couldn't hide. He didn't have a car. He didn't have any way to feed his children. They didn't have many belongings and nothing kind of worth that they could take with them to be able to start over. This is not, an area where you can just show up to a new town, not have a job still, same problem that he had before, and start a new life with absolutely no means to do so. That's why he moved out here in the first place, remember? He moved away from his mom's house in hopes of finding more work. So he's done it before and it didn't work. And the other problem with kind of the second half, the darker side of this theory, the murder-suicide theory, is that there's just no evidence of a murder-suicide. If that's what happened, it must have happened in a place where no one has ever found the bodies.
Yeah, and look, I think it's something you have to consider just because the family was in such dire straits, but Ronnie would have had to have been pretty... look, The only reason we know about this offer is because of Ronnie. Nobody else heard this man make this offer. It's Ronnie that told people about the offer. He told his mother about the offer. So, maybe Ronnie meets this guy in the bar. He strikes up the conversation. He realizes this is the opportunity to do whatever it is he's been wanting to do, whether it was run away from life or annihilate his family. He asks him for a ride, and then the way he convinces his wife is he tells a story about a logging camp with daycare and all this other stuff, and that this man's going to take them there. I think that's pretty far out there. I don't think that's likely what happened. I think for all the reasons Alice said, it just feels wrong, right? I mean, it just doesn't feel like how this went down. It doesn't, no matter how nice the Paul Bunyan guy in the bar is at 1 o'clock in the morning, he's probably not going to offer to move your family in the middle of the night. I mean, like, I'll come pick you up tomorrow, maybe. But the fact he was willing to do that tells me that he was involved in some way.
And also remember, if this were all Ronnie trying to, start a new life and use this guy as a patsy, he did try to leave his kids behind. Remember? He didn't want to take his kids with him. And so if his brother had said, yes, I'll keep the kids, then what? He loved his kids. That's why I think he was trying to leave them behind in case any harm were to come to them. And so it that kind of cuts against it as well. And you're right. It would be really strange for a completely well-meaning person to say, yes, I'll take you and your entire family. I'm going to be, even if it's just children, I'm going to be outnumbered if you guys have ill will towards me, Mr. Paul Bunyan guy, right? Because you have 4 people, 2 of them small children, but why would you want to be in that situation in the middle of the night?
The other possibility is a car accident. It's possible that the Jack family was involved in some sort of car accident while driving to the logging camp, and the wreck has just never been recovered. Now, this might seem strange to you when you first hear it, but recently, I would say in the last 10 years or so, a number of mysterious disappearances have been solved by finding vehicles in bodies of water. Basically, people have gotten really good at tracing the path that cars would take when people disappear, finding a body of water, and using sort of technology, satellite technology, and just good old-fashioned scuba diving, going down and finding these vehicles and solving decades-old cases. There was one of these in Alabama not too long ago where 2 girls who had disappeared, 2 college students who had disappeared, they found their car in a river and solved that case. And I realize that seems unlikely and seems strange, but if this truck went off the road and went into a body of water and sank and nobody got out, it's perfectly possible that nobody ever found them. No one was looking, remember? It wasn't like there was some big search to find evidence of a car going off the road. So if that happened, it's not necessarily the case that anybody would have found it.
But one thing with that issue is that the driver, this Paul Bunyan guy, would have been in the car with him, and we haven't heard of anyone who matches his description who's missing, right? Like maybe he's a complete loner and no one would have been looking for him, but it's been, decades. You would think someone he's connected with, if he were in fact in the logging industry, he didn't show up for work, if he really is recruiting for this ranch and he doesn't show up, at some point someone's going to be like, you know what? Paul never showed up. In fact, I haven't heard from Paul in a long time. So there isn't like 2 separate missing persons that all of a sudden we're like, oh, put them together. They were in a car together and they disappeared together. There's none of that.
And he was a white guy, so they would have looked for him. And you're right. There's no evidence that happened. And there are other problems with the theory as well. The RCMP has already identified holes in the stranger's story, which proved the job offer was likely a hoax. There were no logging camps in the area hiring, and children were not permitted at logging camps. So even if you think it was some sort of under-the-table daycare or something going on, the fact that no logging camps were hiring is a pretty big problem when he says, hey, this is, it's not, you can't walk to it, but it's 30 miles away. And as Alice said, there's no been evidence of some other person disappearing, and we've found no evidence of the wreck. So if it turned out to be a car accident, I think that would be pretty amazing if that's what ended up happening.
All right. So let's go into some other theories that at first glance, maybe you'll say there's no way. We've talked about before during the Highway of Tears episode, a serial rapist and killer, Bobby Jack Fowler. So he was an American suspected killer who was active in both America and British Columbia. So he was a transnational perpetrator. And he's suspected of committing several murders in British Columbia. So many people presume that the Jack family could have just been victims of Fowler as well. However, Fowler was active in his crimes in the U.S. at the time. Talk about an alibi, by the way. I couldn't have committed that crime in Canada because I was committing other crimes in the U.S., but that's pretty good evidence that he wasn't actually the one to blame during the Jack's disappearance. And besides that problem, there's just no evidence to suggest that he was in British Columbia when this disappearance occurred at all. And for what it's worth, the RCMP, they don't believe that Bobby Jack Fowler is responsible for the Jack family disappearance. I think it's worth just thinking about because he was prolific in this area. And when you have something with so little clues, you have to kind of look at all your options. But I think it seems pretty clear here he's not the perpetrator.
Yeah, and this really doesn't fit his MO either. You know, it seems like the chances that he's involved are slim. It doesn't mean it couldn't be some serial killer. Someone in the chat jokingly mentioned Israel Keys. I believe he was 12 at the time this murder happened, so he probably didn't commit this one either. But it's possible it could be some sort of serial killer. I mean, I'll say this. This is a weird thing to do. It is very strange to do something. This is like something out of a movie or a story. It's not the kind of thing you would expect to actually see. Individuals don't often try and kidnap 4 people, even if 2 of them are kids. Kids run away. Kids are hard to control. Kids are loud. There is a male involved. You know, there's a mom who's going to fight for her kids. It is such a strange thing to see something like this that it almost makes you feel like it has to be some sort of brazen person who's done something like this before. What are the chances that this is their first foray into crime? But I guess that's possible. Another possible killer that some people have brought up is David Picton. I'm really interested in Willie Picton, and we're going to cover those cases at some point. This is sort of a bizarre theory. David Picton is the brother of serial killer Willie Picton, and some people have speculated maybe he was responsible for the disappearance. And this is based entirely on the fact that he kind of looks like the guy in the sketch. But as we said, everybody in Canada looks like the guy in the sketch, so it's probably not him. David is sort of a controversial figure. Willie Picton was absolutely a serial killer. There's a lot of speculation about David's involvement. A lot of people who think there's just no way he could not have been involved in those crimes, but I don't think there's any way to prove that. And the RCMP, much like Bobby Jack Fowler, has said it wasn't David Picton. He didn't do it.
So that's another one who feels like we're just striking out left and right, which feels like we're not going to find an answer, but we will continue on. So one potential theory is that this job offer was an actually legitimate offer, but it wasn't legal. Something could have gone wrong while they're going out there. And you can imagine, we know that no logging camps have daycares because kids are not allowed on the ranches because of a health violation. So maybe some ranches really needed people to work, so they had some sort of underground or covert daycare just to get people to be able to work there, but that wasn't allowed by the law, so the offers and the hiring wasn't public, and that's why they had to rely on recruiting at bars around midnight. That might be very possible. We see this in other kind of sectors in society where people are paid under the table or in an illegal manner, and so if the police came by and said, "Hey, ranch, have you guys been hiring?" "Oh, no, of course not." And everyone says that, then you can see why the investigation would yield the answer that no logging camps have daycares and also no one was hiring when they may have been, just not telling the police.
I mean, who knows, right? Like, that's the thing. The angle of the job offer is so weird that obviously it could just be a ploy. It could just be a pure ploy, but maybe there is some truth to it. We're going to talk about sex trafficking in a second. Human trafficking, though, often involves labor. The trafficking of people for labor purposes. And those people are in really bad situations. And, if this were some sort of illegal place, it wasn't a logging camp. It was a marijuana grow. and they needed workers. Need people to work in marijuana grows. You know, there's that. I don't know if you guys watched, I think it was called like Sasquatch or something. It was a documentary, insane documentary, but amazing. It's a documentary about a Bigfoot attack on a marijuana grow in California. And there was this journalist who was there the night this happened. And these people came running in talking about how Bigfoot had just attacked the marijuana grow. And they went out to the marijuana grow and all these people were dead. And the story was that Bigfoot had done it. And it's like, it's just a wild documentary. And I don't want to spoil it. So close your ears if you don't want the truth. It wasn't Bigfoot. But there were people who were killed. And in this incredibly bizarre thing, they used Bigfoot to cover it up, basically. So they blamed it on Bigfoot. So they didn't know who it was. But nevertheless, these were people who were working at this marijuana grow. They get killed and they have to cover it up, right? So maybe they did go to work there. Something goes wrong. Somebody gets injured. They realize this is going to be a problem. They have to wipe out the whole family to cover it up. That's absolutely a possibility. Now, we're just writing fiction at this point. The only evidence of that is the fact that the family disappeared and there was a job offer. So you want to talk about speculation? It's pretty much speculation. Maybe it was Bigfoot.
This is speculation. And the problem with this one, other than having zero evidence, is that you're going to have lots of other people having to work illegally, right? You have a marijuana grow that needs a lot of labor, and that's why you are hiring people illegally, which means other people are seeing what's happening. Now, they may be too scared to say anything, but years later, decades later, someone, and we're not talking one or two people who know, this is going to be like dozens, if not more people who will have known what happened to the Jack family or that they were there. And you can give information to the police without outing yourself completely, right? You don't have to say that you were working illegally or that you were working next to them. You can have a tip that comes in like, I heard that Ronnie did accept the job offer and it was at this ranch. Hang up, right? No, nothing like that has come in. But if he was working at an illegal, like, work camp, others would have been working alongside them unless they just massacred everyone there. But if they did, then who's going to be the labor? You have to think through all these options, and it's just unlikely they would have wanted to massacre an entire camp just for the joy of it. They wanted the camp, if that's what they wanted. They wanted labor to make whatever money they were seeking through marijuana or anything else.
So what about sex trafficking? Sex trafficking always comes up. Sex traffickers are usually not this sophisticated, but it could be possible. And some people speculate the kids were the target all along, and the parents were killed and the boys are forced into sex trafficking. But there's a huge problem with this story. Initially, the unknown man, the stranger, offered Ronnie the job, and he didn't mention that the kids could come. It was only when Ronnie pushed back and said, I can't do it because I've got these two kids and somebody have to take care of them. It was only then that this guy on the fly, apparently, said, oh, don't worry, the camp has daycare. That seems to indicate that initially, at least, this person was fine with either just Ronnie or just Ronnie and his wife. And he only took the two kids because he had to. How that fits in to what exactly was in his mind, I don't know. But it seems to make it less likely that the kids were the actual target.
Yeah, initially, it's very attractive to say that the kids were the target all along for whatever reason. A couple things, unfortunately, when you see sex trafficking of children, way more often it's of young girls and not boys. And unfortunately, that's because the economics favor girls in this illicit trade rather than boys. That doesn't mean you can't make money off of boys. But I do want to push back and kind of play devil's advocate of how the kids, even though they came secondary in the offer, could actually have been part of the plan. And if not the kids specifically, maybe the whole family, because taking the whole family is just risky. If you wanted just Ronnie or just Ronnie and his wife, and then you found out there were two kids, not one, but two kids that were supposed to come along with you, you may back out. Even if you're a serial killer and you wanted to kill Ronnie and they're like, okay, I can kill Ronnie and his wife. Oh my gosh, now I have to kill 4 people. That's just a whole different ballgame, especially when you're introducing like young children who have no filter, don't stay quiet, don't listen to instructions, right? They will scream if they feel like it. That's just a really big risk. You can imagine someone be like, I've been hunting over here. I've been hunting Ronnie, but you know what? I'm just going to kind of back away. Yeah, man, here's my card. I'll give you a call in the morning, and then disappear. Like, didn't have to deal with killing 4 people. So with all this said, I wonder if this person knew Ronnie had been watching him or somehow knew that he had a family of 4 and didn't lead with the kids thing because that could be very creepy. If you start off with making an offer that could draw on the kids, you can imagine that would make some parents' spidey sense go up and say, weird. I've worked in the logging industry. I know that daycares are not really a thing. That's partly why I'm so financially strapped. It's really hard for both of us to make money when we have 2 young children to care for. So if you lead with that, that might make Ronnie suspect you and kind of back away. So maybe this man knew, whether by watching him over time or hearing from others, that he had a whole family, and he reeled him in first with the job offer, knowing that the next question from Ronnie would be like, well, if it's that far away, I don't have a car and I have kids, then he would be like, oh, how convenient. I have a daycare. Because it almost seems like he's already thought of this before. He wasn't caught surprised by the fact that there were kids. He had an answer right away. And that makes me kind of wonder if the whole family was the target all along by the stranger. Why the family? I have no idea. Why the kids and the parents? I don't know. I don't know that the kids were the only target. And I say that because there are easier ways to lure kids away from their parents without having to deal with 2 adults who are going to be a lot scarier to deal with. We've talked about this with the Aisha Degree case, right? Someone lured her away from her family. We don't know who, but they got inside of her decision-making functions in her brain, got her to wake up in the middle of the night, leave during a terrible storm, and walk down the road to go meet somebody. There are so many ways to groom children to be able to get them in a situation where you can then take them without having to deal with the collateral of parents, because you better believe the parents are going to fight like hell to save their children. So I don't think the children were the sole reason for this kidnapping, because you would have just gone straight for the kids and not the whole family. This makes me think, in a sick way, this person targeted all 4 of them, but I have no idea why.
Yeah, I don't know why either.
And I say I don't know why because children, you can understand why. There are kind of a litany of reasons you would kidnap children, right? Whether it's sex trafficking or weird fantasies you have with children, that makes sense. Those are very different reasons from why you would kidnap adults, unless your purpose was to do harm to all of them, which would be like a very difficult murder to take out. Because the truth is, adults are good workers on an illegal work camp. Kids are not. Certainly not a 5-year-old. Not going to be very effective at picking crops, right? They need naps. They need to eat all the time. They need to sleep. Their fingers hurt after working too long. They're just not good workers. So the reasons you would kidnap each kind of set, the parents or the kids, are so divergent that I can't imagine why you'd want to kidnap all 4 of them unless it was just to do them harm.
I mean, one possibility is this is just a hate crime. One possibility is, this guy, I think something we can say about him is he was in the logging industry. He knew the logging industry well enough to sell Ronnie on the idea that he was going to a logging camp. It's the 1990s. My recollection of the early 1990s is there was an economic downturn. It's possible that, this guy saw Ronnie and his family as sort of, lesser than people who were taking jobs of people like him. And maybe he had some sort of rage inside of him. We don't know. And he decided he was going to take it out on the Jack family. And he offers them this deal, to come take this job, takes them out somewhere and kills them. And this was a hate crime directed at 4 people who were indigenous. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's pure speculation, but it's not pure speculation because I think you've made a really good point. It feels like this is a crime where this person was targeting the entire family. It was certainly fine killing the entire family. Unfortunately, I don't think the Jacks are alive somewhere. I don't think the kids are alive somewhere. I think this person murdered all 4 of them and probably murdered all 4 of them that night. He got them in that car. He took them out into the middle of nowhere. And then he, either by himself or with someone else, probably by himself, killed these people. It could be a serial killer. It could be the kind of motives that drive serial killers. That's a possibility. But I tell you, I would like, we should get Julia to do this case. I would like to know what a professional thinks about what would motivate someone to do something like this and what kind of person would do something like this. But It just feels like they must have had a lot of rage and a lot of hate that they directed at this family.
And, to have that much rage and that much racially motivated hate, it is strange, though, that it's not like a spate of Indigenous people disappearing, though. It's just the Jack family, right? It's not, this isn't a Highway of Tears situation where a bunch of Indigenous people are vanishing from Vanderhoof. And that's the kind of head scratcher. So was it something about the Jack family? Is there something we just don't know? Maybe Ronnie had made some bad deals to get out of his financial hole, and he met with the wrong people. He gambled away too much and he could never pay back. And this was kind of like the mafia way of dealing with it. But it was carried out by someone he didn't know, so he didn't know to be on the lookout. But, I think you've hit your head on it, that the most likely thing is that unknown man had something to do with what happened to the Jack family. And what happened to the Jack family is likely that they are dead today. And whatever it is that happened, I don't think there was ever a job. I don't think if there was a job, the Jacks ever made it to that ranch. Too many witnesses. You start getting integrated into a new community and people start asking questions. I think that this unknown man in the bar created this elaborate ruse, knowing that, again, he had to know something about Ronnie, that Ronnie was so desperate he would say yes to this unbelievable offer. That just goes back to me thinking he knew about Ronnie, and Ronnie was not random in the sense that he just picked out someone from the bar, that he had either watched him or whatever reason had it out for Ronnie, and his family was kind of maybe collateral along with him. Now we get into speculation, realm. What is the motive? Why did this guy do it? Why the whole family? If he was mad at Ronnie, why not just take out Ronnie? And, robbery doesn't seem likely here because we've already said it. The family had just about nothing. They were really struggling financially, and the things they packed were going to be just like bare minimum. It's going to be clothes. They're not packing their, if they had jewels and gold bars, because if they had it, first of all, they wouldn't be in such dire straits. But second, they were planning to return after about 10 to 14 days. So there was no need to move everything with them. This was just really going to be like overnight things, toothbrushes, changes of clothes. That's it. Not mementos, not their entire life. And this case continues to just haunt me because why? Why would this person go through all this trouble? And why kill 4 people?
And I'll say this, Ronnie's mom suggested, one of the things you suggested, that maybe there was some debt. I think Ronnie even said something about taking out some loans from people he couldn't pay back. The thing about that is, usually if violence is going to be done to you because of money, it's going to be done in a way to encourage you to pay. Obviously, killing all of them, don't do that. Or it's going to be done to you in a way that encourages everyone else to pay. So if the Jacks were murdered by someone for reasons like that, I think the killer would have wanted them to be found, or at least want people to know what happened to them. There would be rumors in the town, I think, about what happened to them, even if the police can never prove it. And it seems like we don't even have that. I don't know of any case where you had this many people, 4 people, who something tragic happened to them, and you have less evidence than we have in this case. This is as close to people vanishing off the face of the earth as any case we've done. We've done cases where families have vanished and their bodies have been found. Even the Aisha Degree case, which is so unusual. Number one, it's still just one person. And number two, there is more evidence of what happened to her that night and where she went. They found her backpack. They've never found anything of the Jacks. They rode off in that truck that night into the rain or whatever. I don't know if it was raining. It was a little artistic flourish there. And nobody ever saw nothing. Nobody ever saw that truck again. They never saw the guy again. There's not a baby doll or jacket or anything that's ever found of this family. The closest thing you have is that one random tip 6 years later. That's it. And it seems like the RCMP has absolutely nothing in this case. And we have this question on all our outlines. We never answer it because I don't like to say no, but will the case ever be solved? And the reason I want to talk about this in this episode is because I really want to put the emphasis on the listener here. To date, there is no evidence that has been found pertaining to this case. There is no DNA to test. There is no crime scene to analyze. There are no bodies. There is nothing. And for that reason, finding out what happened to the Jack family is going to be almost impossible unless somebody out there knows something about what happened and calls it in. And I have to believe there is someone who knows something about this case. It's been a while, but 35 years, there's still a lot of people who were around. 1990 wasn't that long ago. I like to tell myself that. But there are plenty of people who are around who may well have information, and you are absolutely the key to solving this case. There are cases where people have information, and whether they bring it up or not, the case might be solved. That is not the case here. The Jack family, if we're ever going to know what happened to them, if we're ever going to be able to finish their story and bring them any semblance of justice, it's going to be because somebody out there finally calls in the tip that's going to solve the case.
I think that's exactly right, Brett. We often call on people to call in if they know something, but in this particular case, I do think someone knows something. And here's why I think that. The more I think about this case, when we walk through these theories, the more I am leaning towards the fact that the Jack family, not just Ronnie, but the entire family was targeted. This was not random for many reasons. Number one, it's not clear what you would want to do with just Ronnie or the kids. I don't think that the person was surprised he had kids. He had an answer ready for him. He was not deterred by the fact that this was going to be a difficult thing to pull off. Remember, the man is with Ronnie as he is calling his family members, repeating direct evidence of everything this man told him. He is literally watching the police report write itself, and he doesn't get scared off. He doesn't care. He is Ronnie's not hiding it from him. They're quite literally on the phone with multiple people. There's no telling, but it's probably likely he saw these family members, the cousin, the sister, coming by because he wants to guard his asset. He's not letting this family out of his sight until they get into his car. So he's watching everything that's happening. So it's very likely he sees not only multiple phone calls where the words he's relayed to Ronnie is getting relayed to a third party. So it's not like the perfect crime where no one's going to know what offer was made to Ronnie and no one's going to know where he went. He knows that he's been seen in the bar and by other family members, people who are going to be looking for the Jack family. He knows that the Jack family is connected with others because he sees them on the phone and talking with their family members throughout the night. This is incredibly risky. Despite them being really bad targets for a random crime, he carries through with it. He helps load their belongings into the truck without any anxiety, without second thoughts, without any nervousness, because if he had nervousness, I do think the Jack family would have been like, you know what? Why don't we wait till the morning? No, he had to get them that night. That's why I'm convinced that it was the Jack family he wanted. For what reason? I don't know. But because he wanted the Jack family, somebody knows something. Somebody knows that this man, even if they don't know who the man was, had been watching the Jack family, knew something about the Jack family. He was maybe asking about the Jack family around town. Where does Ronnie go drink? I'm just going to hang out at the bar that's 4 blocks from his home, where that's the only place he ever goes to drink. If he doesn't come tonight, maybe he'll come tomorrow. Maybe he'll come the next day. I can wait. I'm waiting for my prey. He knew where to find Ronnie, and he knew the right words to say to lure him away. Because of all this, I think it took planning, and someone observed something, or someone heard something, or this man told someone something. And because of all this, I think someone knows something, even if they didn't know it mattered until now. So if you were in this area, if any of this rings a bell, whether the location, whether this Paul Bunyan character, these sketches, pay attention, search your mind, because memories are only going to continue to fade from here on out. Maybe there are still witnesses alive. It's still possible. But I think the window of opportunity for people to come forward with helpful information is quickly dwindling. And so I don't think we could have, this episode is coming out not soon enough, because every minute is another minute where we could be losing someone who knows something. So with all of that said, the Jack family has been missing from Prince George, British Columbia since August 2nd, 1989. We said what they looked like last time. I'm going to repeat it here in case it jogs anyone's memory. Ronald Paul Jack was 26 at the time of his disappearance. He was 5 feet 6 inches tall and weighed about 150 pounds. He's indigenous and had black hair and brown eyes. Doreen Ann Jack was also 26 at the time of her disappearance. She was 5 feet 2 inches tall and weighed about 110 pounds. She's also indigenous and had black hair and brown eyes. Russell Fabian Jack was 9 years old at the time of his disappearance. He was 4 feet tall and weighed 88 pounds. He's indigenous and had black hair and brown eyes. And Ryan Paul Jack was 4 years old at the time of his disappearance. He was 3 feet 3 inches tall and 55 pounds. He's indigenous and had black hair and brown eyes. And this unknown man in the bar, he's described as a Caucasian male, 35 to 40 years old, 183 to 198 centimeters, or 6 feet to 6.5 feet tall, 91 to 125 grams, or 200 to 275 pounds. He had reddish brown hair with a full beard, and he was wearing a ball cap, red checkered work shirt, faded blue jeans, a blue nylon jacket, and work boots with leather fringes over the toes. If you have any information about this case, please contact Prince George RCMP at 250-561-3300. And the reference case number, because this case is so old, is 1989-28607. You can also call Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-TIPS. Or go online to CanadianCrimeStoppers.org/tips. And Crime Stoppers does allow you to do anonymous tipping in case you're afraid about giving your name to law enforcement. And yet another way to give any information you may have to help solve this case, you can send an email to the National Center for Missing Persons and Unidentified Remains at Canada's Missing Disparis Canada at rcmp-grc.gc.ca. We'll post all of this on the notes for the show and on our website as well. There are lots of ways to get your information out there. If you don't want to do any of that or you didn't take down notes, email us. We'll get your information to law enforcement.
Yeah, prosecutorspod@gmail.com. If you got tips about this case or any other case and you'd rather talk to us in law enforcement, absolutely reach out. Or if you have other cases you want us to cover, let us know there as well. Well, this has been a heavy case. We're about to go watch Christmas movies with some of the listeners, so that's going to be fun. But before we do, we will answer one question. One question, Alice. You got time for one question?
I have all the time in the world.
Okay. This is from Bob is Cool. Bob is cool. Bob is cool. He wants to know, what is your dream car?
Oh.
Do you want me to go first so you can think about it for a second?
No, I know exactly what my dream car is.
Okay, well, there you go. Is it the Hottasy?
It is the Hottasy. I love it so much. You guys, I rolled up to this awesome, like, very chic resort, I guess, but I was not there, to be fancy at all. I was just rolling up, and I rolled up, and everyone else had, like, a super fancy car, and I was blasting Taylor Swift in my Hottasy, and the guy looked horrified when he opened my door. There were like crumbs of goldfish falling out of my door as he opened my door for me. And I was like, I'll get my own door. Thanks. That smell, that's my Hottasy. For those of you who don't know what a Hottasy is, it's a Honda Odyssey and it makes you hotter when you drive it. So it's called a Hottasy.
Wow. There you go. That's it.
They do not sponsor us because I had to buy my own Hottasy. So Hottasy, if you want to give me another one, I will absolutely have a backup Hottasy.
Okay. Mine is more stereotypical, I think, than Alice's. Alice, that's a beautiful choice, Alice. It's a beautiful choice. Mine would be the red Ferrari that Magnum drives in the TV show Magnum. That car is the most awesome car ever made. So if I could have that car, that Ferrari, that like 1982 Ferrari or whatever, that car was amazing. I loved Magnum growing up. I watched it with my mom all the time. And that car was like the ultimate car. So not quite a Hottasy. Can't fit as many people in it. But really cool car.
I mean, here's the thing. Here's why I can't have real cool cars. whenever, the cars that have the cool Batman doors that open up, every time I've been around a car like that, it has clipped me in the mouth and like given me a bloody nose every single time. I was like at a museum and I knew it was a Batman style car, and they opened the doors and it clipped me in the mouth. And I was like, man, this is why I can't have nice things.
That's hilarious. But, well, Alice, if I ever get one of those cars, I'll be sure to open the door carefully whenever we're riding around in it together.
Thank
we need a few more, gonna need a few more advertisers if we're gonna get the Ferrari. The Odyssey is definitely more achievable.
The Odyssey is definitely achievable, except they're so hot. This is not a joke. It took me forever to find one on the lot because everyone wants one. So
There you go.
all of you don't have to be a mom or dad. You can be a 17-year-old boy who that's your family car and that's your ride. Heck yeah. By the
There
way,
you go.
it's really fun to be the kid who drives the minivan because let's be honest, it's just a party ride. All of you driving minivans, don't you hang your head in shame. It is awesome to have doors that open by themselves and tailgate seats out of the trunk. Absolutely. Wear it with pride.
It's amazing. That's amazing, Alice. I'm so glad we asked this question. Do want to say happy birthday to Sophie. Sophie's in the chat. Sophie's birthday is tomorrow. So by the time you guys hear this, she'll have already had her birthday, but we're all saying happy birthday to her. I hope she has a wonderful day. Okay. Well, like I said, this has been a little bit of a downer, but most of them are, unfortunately. We'll try and do something a little happier. We're getting closer to Christmas. I do want to say, as we record this, it's almost Thanksgiving. And when I say this, it is, I'm not patronizing you. I've been thinking about this recently, about how thankful I am for this podcast. I'm so thankful for Alice, and I'm so thankful for all of you that make this possible. This podcast is just such a wonderful thing in our lives, and we never could have imagined how wonderful it would be, and it's such a blessing. We've talked about this a lot lately, I feel like. I don't know why we're feeling the blessing so much, but it really is a blessing. And this Thanksgiving, I am so thankful for all of you and all the friends that I have made and all the people that I've met. Y'all are so amazing. You are just, I love our listeners. I love them. I love how you guys are from all sorts of different backgrounds. You do so many different things, and you're just all so cool. And it's so great to get to know you guys. And it's been a real blessing. So thank you. Thank you for all of you.
Absolutely. We love you guys, and we love you so much. We're going to leave this medium and go to another social media medium to watch a movie with you. So
that's right. Christmas
see
movie.
you guys soon. A Christmas
Hallmark
movie.
Christmas movie. Of course. Hallmark Christmas movie starring Allison Sweeney, listener and friend of the podcast. So we can't wait to watch it. Okay, guys, this has been great. We love you all. Happy Thanksgiving. By the time you hear this, it'll be closer to Christmas, but that's okay. Have a good Thanksgiving, and we will talk to you soon. But until then, I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors.
I trust the chat. Chat, come up with some good movies while we record, okay? We're gonna. This
But
is called divide and conquer.
It
We're recording.
has to be a Hallmark
And
movie.
here we go.
Number one. That is the
And
most important thing.
am I gonna have to start this?
It
Do you see
has
how he
to
talks
be
over
a
me?
Hallmark
Do you
movie.
literally see how he talks over me?
So when you guys are looking,
Like he proves
Hallmark
the
movie.
point. This is so
Hallmark
amazing.
movie.
Goodness gracious.
Anyways. Okay, let's see. Have I called you Yar yet? I feel like I did. now that we've done all that mushy stuff, we can go back to yelling at each other. Whatever, Alice. I'll talk when I want to.
That's not a joke though. I really love my house.
You love that car. You do.
I love it so much. Like, it is not a joke. I gave up my SUV for it. You would think, like, I've met other people who are like,